Hello and welcome to A Course in Miracles TV. The lesson that we'll be looking at for a portion of the show is lesson number 70, found in your workbook. And we're going to talk a little bit about that lesson and the surrounding lessons that we've been looking at for the last few weeks, starting in lesson 68, which is Love Holds No Grievances, and through 72, lesson 72, which is Holding Grievances as an Attack upon God's Plan for Salvation. And then about midway through the show, I'm going to invite back a guest that we had on several weeks ago, actually beginning near the beginning of the series, Ned DeAntios, who has a lot to say about dreams and working with our dreams and working with the Course, and both our waking and our sleeping dreams, I guess you would say. So we'll have him on in a few minutes. This lesson number 70 is midway between these four lessons, and it is salvation. My salvation comes from me. And this is a real statement of the truth, as far as I can see in my own personal experience, that the temptation in life is to see our salvation. And when the Course talks about salvation, it simply means our happiness, our peace, having the experience of life working and so on. In this lifetime. It's not about waiting to some other life. This is the one that we're in, and this is the one that we need to be saved. And the salvation that the Course refers to is within us. And the temptation in terms of our everyday life is to see salvation outside of us. So, for example, if I think that if I'm unemployed and I get a job, then I'll be happy. I'll be saved. Or if I get an inflow of money that I didn't expect, that'll be great, and I'll be happy and saved then. Or if a person does what they said they were going to do, then I'll be happy. Or if they don't do what they said they were going to do, then I'll be happy. Anyway, the circumstances and situations and people in our life, if we're not conscious, can become great dictators, as the Course calls them, tyrants. Not the persons themselves, but the situations or the people in the situations that I place my salvation on. And so the Course teaches me that my salvation comes from within me. And that when I'm clear about that, I don't look outside me for happiness. I don't look outside me for supply or circumstances to fit up exactly the way I think they should in order for me to be happy. So this is a very important lesson to begin to work with, and it relates to perhaps a section in the text called the responsibility for sight, where in the first line of that is, I am responsible for what I see. I choose the emotions that I would feel. So in other words, we're not victims, and this lesson really puts victim out of reach. In other words, it's not what brings us happiness to perceive myself as capable of being victimized. So how does it work when someone does something that I don't like? Well, I mean, it happens a lot. And what I have to do immediately is begin to, as these other lessons talk about grievances, begin to let go of how I'm seeing the situation and how I'm seeing the person. Begin to let go of what I think I need in the situation, or begin to let go of the goals that I set for that situation or circumstance. and the role that I've assigned to the person or the people involved, and to literally ask internally, my internal guide, my internal teacher, the Course calls the Holy Spirit, to help me see this circumstance or situation differently, to help me see this person differently, help me let go of what it is I'm hanging on to that is literally causing pain. And so when I see that my salvation comes from me, then I have the ability to shift the way I'm seeing it, the way I'm feeling about it. But as long as I put responsibility outside myself, as long as I put the circumstances above me, or the situation more powerful than me, then I'm going to be very unhappy in my life. My salvation comes from me. There's a line in this lesson that's very powerful. I'm reluctant to share it on television, actually, because a lot of the things that I talk about on this program are really not meant for a large audience of people, what we might call a mass audience. Not because they're not good ideas and not because they wouldn't work for them. It's just that a lot of times there are certain truths in spiritual work that we are not, it's the old line, and Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine. Not that people are swines particularly, but our state of consciousness we have to have some willingness to hear these truths. They're not something that can be given out indiscriminately. And this one line is particularly powerful, and I am reluctant to share it, but I will share it. But just with that caveat that if this line doesn't appeal to you, or you may question it or think it's ridiculous or whatever, you have the right to do that. And I'm taking a risk by sharing this with you, but I will, because I'm that kind of guy. I like to do these kind of things. So here it is. My salvation comes from me. It's page 119 in the workbook. The seeming cost of accepting today's idea is this. It means that nothing outside yourself can save you. Nothing outside yourself can give you peace. But it also means that nothing outside yourself can hurt you, or disturb your peace, or upset you in any way. Today's idea places you in charge of the universe, where you belong because of what you are. This is not a role that can be partially accepted, and you must surely begin to see that accepting it is salvation. Well, the line that I was reluctant to read was putting you in charge of the universe. Now, what does that mean in terms of the Course? It's not about all of a sudden, you're king of the universe and that everyone's going to obey your fondest wishes or mildest dreams or whatever. It's not like that. It's not what it means. What it means is that your universe, your own personal universe, and by that it's your thoughts, your awareness, your perceptions, your ideas, the people in your life, the things you're conscious of in the world, etc., etc. All these things are in your universe. And to be in charge of that universe literally means to be willing to accept responsibility for your thoughts, because your thoughts make up your universe. And so by working with the lessons of the Course in Miracles, we begin to change our thinking, we begin to change our perception, our attitudes change, our beliefs change. Literally, our consciousness begins to shift. And so being in charge of the universe in your universe is being in charge of your thoughts and being aware of how your thoughts create your reality, how it creates your perception of life. It's not creating reality, because reality has already been created. It's an is. What it does is by seeing our thoughts clearly, and as you might say, we were talking last week about the two plans. Our thoughts really fall into those two plans, or the two categories, which is healing, which is the Holy Spirit, the thoughts of healing, the thoughts of peace, the thoughts of joy, the thoughts of happiness and intimacy and love, and all those things. Or the thoughts of anger, attack, separation, guilt, All those are also part of the choice that we have in life, and they originate in our thoughts. So by placing ourself in charge of our universe is by taking responsibility for what we're thinking. Now, it takes a lot of mind training, by the way. This is not something that's usually done overnight or real easily, because we've been trained. But we've been trained to think usually along the lines of the ego. We've been trained to think that we're separate, that we're, that we have to survive, and we have to work for a living, and get out there and compete in the world, and we have to somehow stand out and be special, and so on. And that's the ego's plan of salvation. That's pretty good. That's really what it is. The Holy Spirit's plan is to recognize, simply to recognize and be aware that we already are saved, that we already are the Son of God, our true identity, that we have everything already, that there's nothing we really need, and that we are here for one purpose, and that one purpose and function is to extend love, to extend forgiveness, and to accept it for ourselves. Because if I don't accept forgiveness for myself, I will not forgive anyone else. So it's incumbent upon me as an individual to forgive myself first. There's a line that says in the text that atonement is the only responsibility that the miracle worker has, something like that. In other words, our one responsibility in life is to accept atonement for ourselves. And then once I've accepted the forgiveness or the atonement or the salvation for myself, it's natural to extend it to others. There's no effort. And not only that, it's natural to experience abundance. It's natural to experience, you know what work is? Work is relationships. Work is building relationships with people. And if we don't build our relationships with people, our work isn't going to be happy. It isn't going to be satisfying. So that's really what our job is in life. That's a word we coined a long time ago was plurk. Instead of seeing work as drudgery and misery and, got to go to work now and all that kind of stuff, seeing it as our play in life, plurking. And by that shift in perception, life and our work begins to take on a new sort of color, a new feeling, a new attitude, a new way of playing in the world and being in the world. So working is about relationships. And it doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing really in life. What it really boils down to is how well you feel about yourself, how well you feel about those around you, how well you relate to those around you, how willing are you to forgive quickly, how willing are you to let go of grievances before they start building and building and building. I don't know about you, but every time I get a grievance, if I don't start clearing it immediately within myself, then it starts to build, and it gets even worse, and things get even more yucky, and it takes even more effort to work through it. So the quicker we can work on a grievance internally by asking the Holy Spirit's help to help us see it differently, to help us let go of it, to relax and not cling to it, but to realize and recognize it for what it is. It's a grievance, and I can let go of it, and I can be happy. I don't have to cling to this. And by doing that quickly, they don't build up. They don't, in transactional analysis, they call it collecting green stamps. We go about our day in the ego state of mind, collecting all these grievances. This person didn't call me, I didn't call. This person didn't do this person didn't do that, they cut me off in traffic, and all these things. By the end of the day, we've got this big cart that we're carrying around full of baggage of collected grievances, or as they were saying in TA, you bring them home and then you put them in your, remember when you got green stamps, you put them in a stamp book and then you take them in and cash them in. Well, that cashing in process is where we get our satisfaction out of collecting grievances, unfortunately. And that can be eliminated by cutting them off right at the beginning and not letting them build in our own mind first. So with that in mind and dreaming along here in the Course in Miracle universe, we're going to invite our special guest, Ned Diantios, to come back and talk a little bit about dreaming and And maybe if we have bad dreams, we could ask Ned, or I'll ask Ned, what that's about. Let's say if I have a bad dream, what would that mean? And I know that symbols are important and so on and so forth. So why don't you just go for it.
So you want me to talk about bad dreams?
No, not necessarily. You can talk about it. Why don't you talk about what you want? And if
okay,
they come
well,
up.
one of the things I wanted to talk about, when we were on the last show, I wanted to state briefly why I think dreams are so important. The Course in Miracles uses dream as a metaphor, but I think that Jesus is actually referring to a real process that we are engaged in every day, awake or sleeping. Generally, it seems to me, and Carl Jung, who is probably the premier founder of dream work, thought that probably what occurred during the day is we were always dreaming. And if you think of projections, all the grievances, all the hurts, all the miscues or missteps we feel we've made, as a tape that runs throughout us every day that we keep with us, and we're willing to play back at any moment that a situation occurs that seems similar, that is the reason why the workbook works on letting us free ourselves from interpretation, because it's trying to free us from the dream that we're always caught in during our waking state. Now, when we get to a dream state, we get that kind of exemplified for us, because in a dream situation, as you pointed out last week and even on this show, in the dream, circumstances seem to be totally dictated to us. We have no choices in the dream. We don't know what to do, and yet when we're awake, we think, well, why didn't I do this in the dream? Or why didn't I say that? Or why didn't I know that was totally ridiculous? But I think what Jesus is trying to point out is that's just as true in the waking dream as it is in the sleeping dream. But we don't know that. But as we become calmer and more peaceful, we begin to lose the dream tape that is constantly being played for us, awake or asleep. And what begins to happen then is the outer and inner dream collapses, or the waking and sleeping dream collapses. And then we begin to experience things like knowing who it is that's calling us on the phone. We begin to experience sudden awarenesses of recognition when we meet someone for the first time. That seems uncanny.
So like intuition?
Yeah, because what's happening is we're bypassing the ego communication system for the real communication system that God has in place already. After all, like you said before, egos don't communicate except through things. They don't communicate with them, because the things they're communicating through are obstacles too. Cars, houses, occupations, titles, degrees.
Symbols.
Yeah. And so by doing dream work, we begin to be able to see how it applies to us in the waking state as well. And we begin to, and we also begin to see, because you can kind of take the dream that we have at night as kind of a Reader's Digest condensed version of what is constantly going through our head every day. And when it's encapsulated like that for us, and we work the dream, we actually begin to build up a relationship to the self that is the Son of God. And we find a middle ground between ego and self, because it's very hard to incorporate that whole self in this life. But we can begin to approximate that and then have those experiences that really we can't explain.
So our dreams then can be seen as a part of the classroom, in a sense.
Sure.
Part of the curriculum.
You know, I think of Jesus as kind of a lucid dreamer in the waking dream, because he was not occupied by the same concerns, and he did not have much belief in obstacles, be they death or disease or the appearance of deprivation that we do. And it certainly didn't seem to stop him.
And back in those days, they were around just as much as they are today. I mean, nothing really changed in that sense.
Yeah.
So he was able to see through them.
That's right. And I think it's because he saw his own dream for what it was. And he's calling us to do that now, as you stated in the lesson you just used. You know, by becoming masters of our own universe, it's not that we become masters of the outer, but we recognize how much the outer has actually been colored by the inner, of which we are the producers and directors, at least in the form of the ego we are. I think one of the things also, it seems to me, that doing dream work does is it reduces all those polarizations. All those things you referred to that the ego refers to are all polarizations. They're all meant to keep us apart and separate. And one of the main rules of dream work is everyone and everything in the dream is a part of myself. And as we see that, we not only own, what happens is we become acquainted with the depth of our humanity. And as we become aware of our own humanity, we begin to lose all the polarizations, all the what are called shadow issues. And so the separation diminishes. And as that separation diminishes and forgiveness increases, then the other separations seem to mark what we call reality, space and time, and the fact that I'm not supposed to know that a friend of mine is sick across the country, and I call and I find out that that is the case, or I'm not supposed to know that this person that I just met is someone who I'm really going to become really good friends with, or what they do, or those occurrences, those what the Buddhists call spontaneous arisings, are part of our real state, part of our real knowing.
Things that we wouldn't know if there was a real, like if separation was real. In other words, we weren't really joined or connected in some form, invisibly or something like that. What about Nick? Nick, sorry.
That's
Ned.
all right.
Excuse me. Sorry, Nick. Nick.
Nick's our director, by the
yeah.
way. So. Or the director for the show, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about content and form with dreams. That's always fascinating to me, how the outer dream can be reflecting an inner content, both when we sleep and when we're awake. You know what I mean?
Not really.
Okay.
Lead me into that better.
Well, like dreams are the form, let's say, in terms of what we perceive in a dream. We see people, and just like if we were awake. But we also have content. We have experience. We have emotions and feelings and thoughts and things like that. And both in the inner dream when we're sleeping and in the outer dream.
Right.
And I don't know, just what would you?
Well, I think the way they reflect each other, or the let's go to both the issue of reflection, where they reflect each other, and where also form and content are distinguished. The way in which the dream talks to us frequently would tell us the nature of our resistance. As you were talking about the bad dream, bad dreams are generally meant to wake us up. That's why they're as startling sometimes as they are. The outer dream and the inner dream reflect each other, because what happens is they're both learning vehicles, but what we're supposed to do is by seeing the inner dream and working with it, we begin to see the outer as a dream. And we hit a place kind of like it's a crossroads, where all of a sudden there's no distinction between outer and inner. And as there's no distinction between outer and inner dream, as Jesus says, perhaps the laws that obtain to the outer are no more real than they are to the inner. And then as we celebrate that, synchronicities can occur, coincidences occur. You're thinking of someone and they come around the corner, or and those are the things that really, it seems to me, A Course in Miracles is meant to get us to have those experiences, and those are just gentle experiences, and then there are others too.
Where those kinds of experiences really help us to realize that, life isn't what it seems. That we're all separate physical bodies moving around, and no predictability really, and so on and so forth. And I think the dreams are a tool really to help us get to the point.
Well, like I say, it's like getting the Reader's Digest condensed version of the day's attitudes, all of those polarizations. Doing dream work is much like doing philosophy, which I also do. And there's something in philosophy that's called the unexpressed premise. There are all sorts of premises that we carry with us that are unexpressed. But not only are they unexpressed, or as Jeremy Taylor would say, not yet speech ripe, they are also unknown to us. And it is by looking at the dreams that we discover all sorts of attitudes that we would disavow in our waking state.
Right.
And by owning those and becoming the rulers of our universe, as the lesson you mentioned, that is what that rulership is about. Saying, yes, I am in charge of this universe. Now, what am I going to do about that? I'm going to be responsible for that. What is that going to say to me? And then when you begin to realize that's not a universe you want, you let it go. And then the real universe, God's universe, takes its place.
Right. It reminds me of when I was, when I sometimes have had dreams where I was like being killed or dying or something. And just when I think I'm dead, I wake up.
Right.
Is that kind of sometimes a metaphor?
Well, I think that's a metaphor for ego death. I mean, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I had a death dream," and usually it's like the idea that we have become so identified with one particular thing that if we don't have that, a relationship, job, or any of the other things you suggested, I'm going to die. And then we wake up, and the dream is laughing at us. It's telling us, you know, you're way too caught up with this as a belief in your own identity. I mean, our identity continues, like the notion of immortality, far beyond the existence of those things.
Great. Yeah, I really believe that. And, well, we have about a minute left. And is there anything that you'd like to kind of just summarize in terms of dream work and using the course?
I think that the main thing, and you and I have both talked about this, is the realization that this dream that we're in is only let go of when it becomes a happy dream. That is the real point. Whatever concepts we want to come to, whatever grand ideas, however we do it, those are really not important. Those are all the form that you alluded to earlier. The content is happiness. The content is peace, and real progress is found when you and the others around you experience joy.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you. Well put. So we invite you back next week at the same time and the same station. And thank you, Ned, for joining us and giving us our dream report. And in the meantime, may the force be with you. God bless you. Bye-bye. Happy.